Father, we thank Thee for Your many blessings. We thank You that we have time to study together, and we pray that we'll understand. We're looking at Revelation. We need to understand that. Help us to truly put the things together so the rest of the Bible makes sense. We pray that our minds will not only hear, but that we'll retain and keep it. Amen. Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Great Controversy, page 54, and also 445. In the 6th century, the papacy had become firmly established. Its seat of power was fixed in the imperial city, and the Bishop of Rome was declared to be the head over the entire church. Paganism had given place to the papacy. The dragon had given to the beast his power and his seat and great authority. The beast mentioned in this message, whose worship is enforced by the two-horned beast, is the first or leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, the papacy. Now, I want you to notice the papacy during the 6th century was established. Now, the papacy did not do that. The papacy was said to be the head over the entire church. Now, the papacy is in Rome, but that's also where the head of the Roman government is. It was the pagan Roman government that made the papacy the head. It doesn't say that in this thing, but we need to understand that. The pagans established the papacy as the head of the church. We've got to hold on to that, because that will move through history. In the story of redemption, page 331, now were fulfilled the words of Jesus, you shall be betrayed, both by parents and brethren and kinsfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Persecution opened upon the faithful with great fury than ever before, and the world became a vast battlefield. For hundreds of years, the Church of Christ found refuge in seclusion and obscurity. So the church is moving into the wilderness. That's not said in this place, but we need to, as much as our memory can tell us things, we need to plug them in here. Great Controversy, 439. This prophecy, which is nearly identical with a description of the little horn of Daniel 7, unquestionably points to the papacy. So, Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 go together. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. Great Controversy 439 again, it says, this period, as stated in preceding chapters, began with the supremacy of the papacy, A.D. 538, and terminated in 1798. Now, we need to remember that the world has not always recognized A.D. 538 as the beginning of that period. For centuries, they used 537. Now, the reason they did that was they started in January instead of the autumn of the year. But we saw that the events all started in the autumn. At that time, the Pope was made captive by the French army. The papal power received its deadly wound, and the prediction was fulfilled, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. Great Controversy 579. The infliction of the deadly wound points to the downfall of the papacy in 1798. So 1798 begins that time that we call the time of the end. Now, that's not the end of time. That's another event. But the time of the end, we need to know that date, 1798. After this, the prophet, whose deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Paul states plainly that the man of sin will continue until the second advent. Now, I'm going to stop again. She's telling us things, very important things. The papacy does not come to his end and no one can help him. That does not apply to the papacy. He lasts until the end. That one sentence wipes out this false concept that's being taught. To the very close of time, he will carry forward his work of deception. In both the old and the new world, the papacy will reserve homage and the honor paid to the Sunday institution. That's another big thought that rests solely upon the authority of the Roman Church. Now, our modern scholars today try to tell us that can't be true because there were people keeping Sunday before the Catholic Church came into power. But there is no power. Nobody can prove there is a power that did that except the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church in the 4th century began putting down that power. And we see it through the centuries. The only reason people keep Sunday today is because of the Roman Church. Nobody else said that. Review and Herald, July 13, 1897. In his subtlety, Satan was covered up in this fact, the fact that Sunday is not the Sabbath, and has presented a common day as sacred that the whole world may become guilty before God by transgression. Well, we need to think about that for a few moments. Is the whole world in transgression? Well, yes. How did they get in transgression of the Sabbath? It was Satan. He set up the day Sunday, and the whole world keeps it except for the Seventh-day Adventists. And I'm not sure they're not violating it. We'll get to that another time. But the whole world is keeping Sunday. Early writings, page 65. The whole nation has followed after the beast, and every week they rob God of his holy time. Signs of the Times, March 22nd, 1910. The Sabbath question is to be the issue in the great final conflict in which all the world will act a part. So the Sabbath, the whole world is keeping a false Sabbath, and that's going to be the final conflict. God is going to move in on the world to make the Sabbath an issue again. Men have honored Satan's principles above the principles that rule in the heavens. They have accepted the spurious Sabbath, which Satan has exalted as a sign of his authority. So now we see something else. The spurious Sabbath is a sign of Satan's authority. Anybody who keeps another day, including Sunday, is following Satan, and they don't know it. It seems to me we ought to be warning some people. Review and Herald, February 6, 1900. The man of sin has worked with a marvelous perseverance to exalt the spurious Sabbath, and the disloyal Protestant world has wandered after the beast and has called obedience to the Sabbath instituted by Jehovah disloyalty to the laws of the nation. Well, every nation has laws about Sunday. They're not always enforced, but they have them. Now, when they set up those laws, the people think, and they really believe it, that people are being disloyal to Jehovah when they keep another day. So we have a real problem in this world. People really believe Sunday is the day. And they don't stop to think. Satan's been doing this a long time. Testimonies to the Church, Volume 6, page 14. Satan is working with the utmost to make himself as God and to destroy all who oppose his power. Now, I'm going to stop. These sentences are loaded, but people seem to read these sentences and don't see anything. It said he's setting himself up as God. Now, how could he possibly do that? How could he do Sunday and make himself God and nobody notices? Well, the fact that people are keeping Sunday means they're also keeping the Trinity. And Satan set up the Trinity so they would worship him. So the Trinity and Sunday go together. Now, that should be a hard thing for Seventh-day Adventists to hear, because they're taught that the Trinity is true. And it's not in the Bible, and it's not in the Spirit of Prophecy. We need to pick up on these things. Today, the world is bowing before him. Now, she didn't tell us how they bow before Satan. She just said Sabbath. But the Trinity is involved in what she's saying. His power is received as the power of God. The prophecy of the Revelation is being fulfilled, that all the world wondered after the beast. And that's what they're doing if they keep the Trinity, because they will also keep Sunday. They go together. Great Controversy 439. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. This prophecy, which is nearly identical with the description of the little horn of Daniel 7, unquestionably points to the papacy. Power was given unto him to continue 42 months. The 42 months are the same as the time and times and the dividing of time. 3 years and a half, or 1260 days of Daniel 7. The time during which the papal power was to oppress God's people. So the people, many of them did not know what the church in the wilderness was, so they tried to worship the Catholic Church and always got in trouble. The people who keep the Bible cannot worship as the Catholics do. And it was given him to make war with the saints. Well, that's a century's story. Testimonies, Volume 7, page 182. Under one head, the papal power, the people will unite to oppose God in the person of his witnesses. This union is cemented by the great apostate. So it says one head. It does not say he heads up the Catholic Church and somebody else heads up the Protestant churches. It doesn't say that. The head is going to be one, the papal power, the Pope. Early writings, page 36. These plagues enraged the wicked against the righteous. Now I'm going to stop again, because the church doesn't teach anything about this. The church says there are no righteous people. That's what they teach. We all sin until Jesus comes back. So there are no righteous people. But this says there are righteous people. That sentence goes by really fast. I'm going to read it again. These plagues enraged the wicked, that's one group of people, against The righteous. The righteous are the true Christians. They thought that we had brought the judgments of God upon them, and that if they could get rid of the earth of us, the plagues would then be stayed. A decree went forth to slay the saints. The saints are the holy ones, the righteous ones, the real people of God, which caused them to cry day and night for deliverance. This was the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, when we get to the time of Jacob's trouble, the true people of God will go through that time. They will be persecuted by the whole world. But the people who are still sinning and going to church will not be part of that. Now that has to become clear to us. So we're not playing games anymore. We've got to join the Church of Christ. And you can't do that with any worldly church today. It's not possible to be a Seventh-day Adventist following the organization and call yourself a righteous person. We've got to stop and think about these things, because the world's going to keep going on and we expect something to change. Well, what's going to change? God's people, his true people, are still the true ones, and the rest of the world belongs to Satan. We can't play games with this. We've got to read these words and see these words are true. Patriarchs and prophets. Page 63 is about all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. The plan of salvation had been laid before the creation of the earth, yet it was a struggle even with the King of the universe to yield up his Son to die for the guilty race. Now there are several things going on in that brief sentence. If there is no Son, why should there be a King of the universe that sent him? That's not possible. This sentence can't be true if Jesus is not a literal Son of God. So we must learn how to read. Great Controversy 579. But in this homage to the papacy, the United States will not be alone. The influence of Rome in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion is still far from being destroyed. In both Old and New World, the papacy will receive homage and the honor paid to the Sunday institution that rests solely upon the authority of the Roman Church. We read that with another part. Verse 11, I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon. Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4, page 277. Here is a striking figure of the rise and growth of our own nation. Now that should surprise a lot of people on this earth to find the Bible talks about the United States. But we have something very clear here. It says the lamb-like horns, emblems of innocence and gentleness, well represent the character of our government as expressed in its two fundamental principles, republicanism and Protestantism. You mean that's what the United States? It has two horns? Well, wait a minute. That's how it started. But something happened very early in its history, and it did something else. Instead of maintaining republicanism, which is not a party, it's an attribute. Republicanism means the whole people are involved. Manuscript 17, 1906. The United States is a land that has been under the special shield of the Omnipotent One. God has done great things for this country, But in the transgression of his law, men have been doing a work originated by the man of sin. Well, this country never did keep the Sabbath. It has always been a Sunday-keeping country. So we've got to understand what she's saying here. Satan is working out his designs to involve the human family, that's the whole world, in disloyalty. Review and Herald, January 1, 1889. Prophecy represents Protestantism as having lamb-like horns. Now that's because of justification by faith in the surety. They did justification by faith, that's true. But speaking like a dragon, well, there's something wrong here. Because justification by faith does not take us into heaven. No one is going to be in heaven because they received only justification by faith. Justification by faith comes first, sanctification comes second, and glorification comes third, and then immortality. There is a satanic force propelling the Sunday movement. So if you go to the movies, they're all about Sunday. If you listen to the web, you're going to hear Sunday. If you do almost anything in this world, it's going to involve Sunday. Now, when people talk about the seventh day as the Sabbath on the web, are they teaching people how to keep it? Going to church on Saturday is not keeping the Sabbath. Only a holy person can keep the Sabbath holy. So you have to be a holy person to come into that mode. And just because you join a church with 20 million people going to church on the right day, that doesn't mean you have done it. Even the men who are engaged in the work, that's the ministers, they themselves are blinded to the results which will follow their movement. So the ministers are blind people leading people to keep the seventh-day Sabbath. Isn't that amazing? Because they don't know how to keep the Sabbath. They don't preach obedience. Manuscript 135, 1902. Religious powers allied to heaven by profession and claiming to have the characteristics of a lamb will show by their acts that they have the heart of a dragon and that they are instigated and controlled by Satan. The time is coming when God's people will feel the hand of persecution because they keep holy the seventh day. Now, do you notice how she worded that sentence? She did not say because they keep the seventh day. No, they keep holy. And you have to be holy to keep it holy. Satan has caused the change of the Sabbath in the hope of carrying out his purpose for the defeat of God's plans. So she's telling us a lot of things in these sentences. Let's see if we can get a hold of what she's saying. General Conference Bulletin, April 13, 1891. The Word of God plainly declares that his law is to be scorned, trampled upon by the world. There will be an extraordinary prevalence of iniquity. The professed Protestant world will form a confederacy with the man of sin, and the church and the world will be in corrupt harmony. Now, that's hard to visualize because we see all these beautiful people keeping Sunday. How can it be that they're part of Satan's plan? But that's what's happening, and we need to warn them. And the people who listen will stop doing it and keep the Sabbath holy. Now, the real problem is this. How can they go to a Seventh-day Adventist church any place in the world and keep the Sabbath holy? The people in the church will teach them how to not be holy. There are some real problems in this world. We can't keep what these books are saying if we don't know what we're doing. Here, the great crisis is coming upon the world. The scriptures teach that popery is to regain its lost supremacy and that the fires of persecution will be rekindled through the time-serving concessions of the so-called Protestant world. Well, if we are just like the rest of the Protestants and we keep Sunday and we keep the Trinity, how do we keep the Trinity and Sunday? I want to ask you if you know, after all the talks that I have given on this subject. Well, if we are teaching the people righteousness by faith, we are teaching a Sunday doctrine. That is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches commandment keeping, the faith of Jesus. And that is not righteousness by faith. You can't get anywhere with righteousness by faith. It's such a terrible delusion. All the churches teach it. Great Controversy 441. The Constitution guarantees to the people the right of self-government, providing that representatives elected by the popular vote shall enact and administer the laws. Now, I'm not going to get into that. There are too many people who don't understand this. It would sound like I'm making war with them. But if you read there carefully, it says the Constitution guarantees the right of the people of self-government. Now, they have self-government by providing representatives elected by popular vote. The popular vote, it doesn't say anything there about electorates. It said popular vote. We need to understand something has happened in our government. It's changed. And every man being permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. That means no government can tell you what to do about going to church. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. Well, we don't have it anymore. The legislators, the lawmakers, are all playing games with it. The lamb-like horns and dragon voice of the symbol, to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. Did you get that? By such action, it will give a lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon, like the devil, and exercise all the power of the first beast, like the Catholic Church, plainly foretells the development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution that was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and a leopard-like beast, the devil and the Catholic Church. And the statement that the beast with two horns, the United States, causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. We're going that direction. We are going to have the laws passed that make us worship the first beast. Indicates that the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. Page 579. This prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance, which Rome claims as a special acknowledgement of her supremacy. Now, you will understand that better if you read the little tract called the Rome's Challenge. We've been selling that for years and years and years, since the beginning of this church. Read it carefully. You'll read in Rome's own words. They admit they're the ones who are pushing the Sunday observance, whose deadly wound was healed. Review and Herald, December 18, 1888. Satan will come personating Jesus Christ, working the mighty miracles, and then will fall down and worship him as Jesus Christ. We shall be commanded to worship this being, whom the world will glorify as Christ. Verse 13, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. Early writings, page 59. I saw that soon it would be considered blasphemy to speak against the wrapping, and that it would spread more and more. Well, what is the wrapping? She's talking about spiritualism. It came to New York City, and then it spread all over the whole world. That Satan's power would increase, and some of his devoted followers would have power to work miracles, and even to bring down fire from heaven in the sight of men. Spiritualists are going to bring down fire from heaven. That's what it will look like. Series B, number 6, page 32. Spurious scientific theories are coming in as a thief in the night. Now, that has not been understood correctly in the past. At least not entirely. Spurious scientific theories. People have tied that to dead people. And the scientific theories are saying they come alive again and they can communicate, all those things. But this sentence, spurious scientific theories, is talking about the Trinity. That's the way Ellen White identified it. Now see if you can make some sense of what we're going to read. Stealing away the landmarks and the pillars of our faith. So the scientific theories have something to do with stealing our pillars and our landmarks. Now, you're going to have a hard time pitting that only on dead people who science says are alive somehow. This is dealing with the Trinity. That wipes out all the landmarks and the pillars. God has shown me that medical students, it's a medical person that did this, are not to be educated in such theories. Do we understand that now? That was Kellogg. Because God will not endorse these theories. That is the Trinity theory brought into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. People don't read that. They don't see that. The most spurious temptations of the enemy are coming in, and they're coming in the highest, most elevated plane. That's God. These spiritualize the doctrines of present truth until there is no distinction between the substance and the shadow. I'm not going to get into that right now. We have a long way to go yet. But she told us something in this paragraph that nobody sees. This is about the Trinity. You know that Satan will come in and deceive, if possible, the very elect. He claims to be Christ, and he's coming in pretending to be the great medical missionary. That's Jesus, the great medical missionary, to prove that he is God. That's the Trinity. She's telling us plainly what she's talking about. We must stand barricaded by the truths of the Bible. The canopy of truth is the only canopy under which we can stand safely. Now, I doubt that the person who brought that into this collection of quotes I'm reading understood that was the Trinity. But that's what she was saying. The church has never pulled these statements out to what she was talking about. They always make it mean something else. The Great Controversy, 612. Servants of God with their faces lighted up and shining with holy consecration will hasten from place to place to proclaim the message from heaven. Now, that was in the sanctuary. Where do you see this? Well, you see it in the golden candlestick. It was not just a golden candlestick, it was symbolized by almonds. And almonds in the Hebrew is shakad. And shakad means to hasten. So you see right there in the sanctuary, this sentence is, by thousands of voices all over the earth, the warning will be given. Now, she didn't say by millions of voices, because the church only had 10,000 people in it. So she couldn't say that. But when it says thousands of voices, that's not enough. Miracles will be wrought. The sick will be healed. And signs and wonders will follow the believers. Now, I'm going to talk about the miracles. I've never done that in my meetings, but at this time, and we're going to talk about the health message, the health reform, and how people are going to be healed. Now, I can't get very far into it. We won't spend very much time with the water cure, but there's a whole bunch of things that Ellen White wrote on the water cure. Satan also works with lying wonders, even bringing down fire from heaven in the sight of men. Thus, the inhabitants of the earth will be brought to take their stand. Review and Herald, August 9th, 1906. The time is at hand when Satan will work miracles. Uh-oh. Well, if Satan's working real miracles, and God is working real miracles, how are we supposed to tell the difference? To confirm minds in unbelief that he is God, all the people of God are now to stand on the platform of truth as it has been given in the third angel's message. We're supposed to understand health reform. But I'm going to read things to you that you probably have never heard and don't even consider. All the pleasant pictures, all the miracles wrought will be presented in order that, if possible, the very elect will be deceived. The only hope for anyone is to hold fast the evidences that they have confirmed the truth in righteousness. The Signs of the Times, February 26, 1885. These may profess to be followers of Christ, but they have lost sight of their leader. They may say, Lord, Lord. They may point to the sick who are healed through them and to other marvelous works and claim that they have more of the Spirit and power of God than is manifested by those who keep his law. But their works are done under the supervision of the enemy of righteousness, whose aim is to deceive souls and are designed to lead away from obedience. Now, she just told us what the issue is, to lead away from obedience. Truth and duty. In the near future, there will be still more marked manifestations of the miracle-working power, for it is said of him that he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. Now, I want to say things about what is going on here, but we have to keep moving. Verse 14, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Review and Herald, April 23rd, 1889. Already preparations are advancing, and movements are in progress which will result in making an image to the beast. Events will be brought about in the earth's history that will fulfill predictions of prophecy for these last days. Now, I want to remind you that in the year 1872, the Supreme Court of this country decided we are a Christian nation. And they have passed many laws since that time that say so. So maybe we already are the image of the beast. I'm not going to say. I just have a strong suspicion. We have really moved into it. Signs of the times, March 22, 1910. When the Protestant churches shall unite with the secular power to sustain a false religion, for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecutions, when the state shall use its power to enforce the decrees and sustain the institutions of the church, then will Protestant America have formed an image to the papacy, and there will be national apostasy, and will end only in national ruin. Testimonies to Ministers, page 206. When the nation for which God has worked in such a marvelous manner, and over which he has spread the shield of omnipotence, abandons Protestant principles. Now, I'm going to stop right there. She says point blank, this nation is going to abandon Protestant principles. That means it will no longer be a Protestant anything. So what will it be then? Well, the only other thing is Roman Catholicism, and through its legislature gives countenance and support to Romism. There it is. In limiting religious liberty, then God will work his own power for his people that are true. That's the true Christians. The tyranny of Rome will be exercised, but Christ is our refuge. That is a message to the true people of God. The true people of God are the ones that read these words, believe them, live them, and have a practical use of them. Nobody else is God's people. Letter 11, 1890. The Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes. Now we need to remember that. Before probation closes, we will have the image of the beast. For it is to be the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. This is the test that the people must have before they are sealed. Before they are sealed. We're getting some time frames here. There are all kinds of people confused about when does the sealing happen. Some people have it happening way in the past. That's not what this sentence just said. All who prove their loyalty by God by observing his law, and that's more than the Ten Commandments, and refusing to accept a spurious Sabbath will rank under the banner of the Lord God Jehovah and receive the seal of the living God. Those who yield the truth of heavenly origin and accept the Sunday Sabbath will receive the mark of the beast. Now that's the first one we've read about the mark of the beast. We have to learn more about that. Review and Herald, April 15th, 1890. When the legislative frames laws exalting the first day of the week and put it in the place of the seventh day, the device of Satan will be perfected. Well, we're already there. The signs of the times, May 6, 1897. All nations and tongues and people will be commanded to worship this spurious Sabbath. Now, most of the people who go to all these different churches have no idea it's the spurious Sabbath. They believe it's the true Sabbath. Somebody has to tell them it's the spurious Sabbath. The decree enforcing the worship of this day is to go forth to all the world. In a limited degree, it has already gone forth. In several places, the civil power is speaking with the voice of a dragon, just as the heathen king spoke to the Hebrew captives. So, Ellen White recognized it was already happening. Review and Herald, November 5th, 1889. The sins of the world will have reached into heaven when the law of God is made void. When the Sabbath of the Lord is trampled in the dust and men are compelled to accept it instead an institution of the papacy. Review and Herald, December 26, 1899. Human enactments. Laws manufactured by satanic agencies under a plea of goodness and restriction of evil will be exalted, while God's holy commandments are despised and trampled underfoot. And all who prove their loyalty by obedience to the law of Jehovah must be prepared to be arrested and to be brought before councils that have not for those standard in high holy law of God. Manuscript 118, 1899. Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast. Well, why isn't it? Well, she tells us when it becomes the mark of the beast. And will not be until the decree goes forth, causing men to worship this idol Sabbath. That time will come when this day will be the test, but that time has not yet come. So, nobody has the mark of the beast yet, because the decree has not been passed. The forcing of people to go to church on Sunday has not happened yet. So the mark of the beast hasn't happened, but we are very close. Early writings, 67. Those who would not receive the mark of the beast and his image when the decree goes forth must have decision now to say, nay, we will not regard the institution of the beast. Great Controversy, 635. When the protection of human laws shall be withdrawn from those who honor the law of God, there will be in different lands a simultaneous movement for their destruction. There's going to be a decree all over the world for their destruction. As the time appointed in the decree draws near, the people will conspire to root out the hated sect. Now, that's a word that Ellen White has not used about the people of God. The hated sect. That's the world calls them. They are a sect. It will be determined to strike in one night. That's all over the world. In one night, a decisive blow which will utterly silence the voice of dissent and reproof. So the whole world will set up a law that says we're going to kill all the Seventh-day Adventists, and that will end the problem. Now, when it says Seventh-day Adventists, I don't know if they will really call them by that name, because they will not be official Seventh-day Adventists anymore. They will be the true Church of God. We have lots of things to learn yet. All right, I think we'll close with this letter 55, 1886. We are to be ready and waiting for the orders of God. Nations will be stirred to their very center. Support will be withdrawn from those who proclaim God's only standard of righteousness, the only sure test of character. And all who will not bow to the decree of national councils and obey the national laws to exalt the Sabbath instituted by the man of sin to the disregard of God's holy day will feel not the oppressive power of popery alone, but of the Protestant world, the image of the beast. Satan will work his miracles to deceive. He will set up his power as supreme. The church may appear as about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains, while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. None but those who have been overcoming by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony will be found with the loyal and true, without spot or stain of sin, without guile in their mouths. Now, we used to read statements like this, if we read them, and turn it into a metaphor and just say, well, they're going to be something like that, but they won't really be without sin. They will never be without spot or wrinkle. They will never be really loyal and true, but this is the people of God. Well, I'm sorry to tell everybody, but these statements are the truth. These people will exist, and they will exist under all these circumstances. She says this is a terrible ordeal. What's a terrible ordeal? She says the church, the true people of God, appear to fall. In another place she said she looked for them and couldn't see them any place on the earth. But then she looked again and she saw a little light here and a little light there and a little group of lights here. The church appears to fall. Now, that means the organized church. That will appear to fall, and it will be fallen. But the true people of God, you look again and you begin to see them. One here, one there. One. It's not a church as far as lots of people. It's just one here, two or three here. We've got to change our mind about how we're thinking about things. She says, it remains. The true church remains. But the false church falls. And it will never rise again. But the true church remains. It'll be on the earth. It says, while the sinners in Zion, the church, will be sifted out. They're gone. They're lost forever. But the church remains. And it's a few people. The chaff separated from the precious wheat. The few people who still belong to God. We have not been thinking about these things correctly. She says it's a terrible ordeal, and that's what it's going to be. A terrible ordeal. We'll look around and say, well, there's Aunt Lucy. Where'd she go? She's not really part of the church, and her whole life you thought of her as one of the real people, but she's gone. Where's that minister that I listen to all the time? That's a terrible ordeal, but we're going to go through that. The true people will have no guile in their mouth. And that's never going to change, because that's who the 144,000 are, without guile in their mouth. Now, these things seem impossible as you look at the human race, but they're the truth. This is going to happen. And we have to decide we're going to be one of those. And then we have to go through the terrible struggle to maintain it. Now, it's a terrible struggle at first, because once we start living that way, we find out Jesus was saying the truth. His yoke is easy and the burden is light. That's what we want to get to. Easy and light. Okay, that's enough for this time. Father, we're so thankful that you have preserved these words for us. We can find them no place else. We're not going to find them in the church. We need to understand that we will not hear these words in the church with understanding. Help us understand your voice, that you are speaking to us and you're telling us the way it really is. Bless us. Lift us up. Let us be one of these people, the few, and we will praise your name.